This is going to be a completely informal session. We're going to try to answer any safety questions, but what I really want to focus on is OSHA's top 10 from last year. We'll talk a little bit about it. Respiratory protection and a few things like that are kind of creeping up on us. OSHA directives. So in our area is region 3, that's the Maryland, Virginia, DC, Delaware, that sort of area. That's got some different regional emphasis. So if you've got a metal fab shop, if you've got, we'll go through those things, but I'll show you where to find that. We'll talk a little bit about national emphasis programs. That's a little bit about how OSHA gets on your job in the first place. And then we'll actually hopefully have enough time to touch the OSHA website, because there's a lot of great information on there. Some people are nervous to use it because they're worried that OSHA is going to pop up. If you have questions, you can just put it in the chat box. If I don't get to it, I'm sure I can see your raise your hand function if you click on that as well. I think that's still on here. I was using one the other day and I said that, and they don't have that anymore. But just let us know one way or the other. And if I don't see it, hopefully Chastity can cue me in and let me know there's a question there. So with that, in the chat box, I did put in my contact information. So if you have any questions afterwards, if we work with Preferred all the time. So if any of their clients have questions, it doesn't cost you to call me and ask me a question. It doesn't cost you a dime. So I'd rather you ask those questions than deal with an accident or deal with OSHA later. All right, so I guess we'll get started. Can everybody see my screen here where my arrow is next to 10, machinery and machine guarding? Hopefully, yes.
Yes.
Can you see that screen? Not everybody at once now. Oh, there we go. Elizabeth, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so machine guarding. If you are working in construction, look at your grinders, right? Your grinders, your angle grinders are probably the quickest thing. People love to pull those guards off of. Oh, I can't get in the corner. Oh, I can't get there. There's a lot of excuses of why you can't use the grinder with the guard. The fact is that grinder spins at a very high rate. So, 10, 20, 30,000 RPMs, that's very fast. Any of those blades fracture, they're coming at you, and that can cause major death. If you have table saws, this is the table where table saws live. Everybody pulls off the guard. Everybody that has nail guns pulls the spring out of the nail gun. All these things have to be in place. Whatever the manufacturer puts in place, you have to come up with a pretty good reason besides it made my job hard in order to pull them off. If you have a shop, your grinders, your bench grinders, all right, this is where your rest table and your bench grinder has a certain allowance, like 1/8 of an inch. So it's good to put a gauge next to it so you can check that from time to time. So as the stone gets smaller, you get that there. You also need to get your grinder shields in place, etc. Anytime you have compressors, anything with rotating pulleys, they love when they switch the belt to go ahead and leave that guard off. Again, this is all found there. So that's the 10th most cited item. Power industrial trucks. They say general industry, but they use that for any of the power industrial trucks, training wise, etc. Construction does have it now in the 1926 standard, but they still like to cite that 1910-178. A lot of times it's not using the seat belt, which turns into, well, I didn't know I had to. Well, that means that's a citation for what? Lack of training. All right, we got to train these people. It actually says this and fall protection and a few others are the standards that actually say must certify. Okay, they use that word certify. Well, who certifies? They put it back on the employer. So an employer can hire somebody like me or somebody like a rental company to come out and do training. We can say, yeah, they look good to go. They've had past experience. They're safe operators. We put them through their paces. Everything looked great. But unless that employer takes that training and just does a little bit of paperwork and says, okay, and then watches them, they have to have somebody there to watch them as well and say, yes, they're certified. There's a lot of trouble with getting cited with training under powered industrial trucks. And then if you're trained and certified on one forklift, it doesn't mean you're going to be trained and certified on every forklift. So, these all-terrains operate different than the warehouse, operates different than those little piggybacks on the back of the trucks. The order pickers at Home Depot, they all operate a little bit different. So if you have a forklift, actually, if you have any piece of machinery, make sure you get training on it. Eye and face protection. All right. Again, we're given two eyes. We're switching. Our industry and construction seems to really be focusing on the helmets more than the hard hats now. So you see a lot of people getting the casks and the other hard hats, with Milwaukee on it or DeWalt or whatever the manufacturer is. They get these and they get a face shield that comes down around their nose. And the salesperson will tell you that's good for eye protection. That is not good for eye protection. That's face protection. It doesn't meet the Z87 standard. Inside all your fall protection glasses, you're going to see Z87. When do you need to wear eye protection? Whenever there is potential or is potential for debris flying into your eye or objects flying into your eye or solvents. Sometimes the eye protection can be glasses. Sometimes if you're dealing with solvents and different chemicals, they have to be full goggles and chemical rated goggles. Okay. So making sure we have the right protection for the chemical we're using, we have to go back and look at that SDS sheet. Everybody knows what that is, hopefully. The safety data sheet. It should be available for any chemical that your employees come into contact with. We're required to not only have that sheet, but also train our employees on any chemical they may be exposed to. All right. And that's one and done training. If you have gasoline, diesel, grease, upside down paint, WD-40, you name it, you have 10 chemicals that you use all the time, make that part of your orientation program so you can check that box and teach them what the different 16 different parts of an SDS sheet is so they can go back and look at it later. These chemical compounds do change. Okay. So that's why it's a requirement to look at that. Face protection. We're grinding, we're welding. We've got anything that might burn us, any chemicals that might splash on us. Those are the times we might need face protection. One does not hold out for the other. Meaning if I need eye protection, I need eyeglasses, I need goggles. If I need face protection, I need something over those glasses and goggles. Running a chainsaw, for instance, I'm supposed to have safety glasses and a chainsaw type helmet with the mesh screen so it doesn't kick back and hit me, right? So that's some different items that we see. And that's number 8. That's dropped over the years a little bit, but not much. 7, control of hazardous energy. How many times have you seen it on the site where somebody's working hot? Everybody says we don't work hot. We don't work hot with electricity. What do I mean by that? We shut the energy off every time we work on it. My first question is, do you have a fluke meter? Do you have a testing meter? They go, well, yeah. Well, then you work hot because you have to have that machine on when your hands go in there and touch those probes to the testing unit. So, we can't really lie to ourselves. We have to see what our actual exposure is. And this is where we get into trouble from time to time. You get people that are changing blades out on saws, or they're changing that grinder stone out on the grinder. They're changing something, but they didn't unplug it, or they didn't take the battery off of it. That's what we're running into the most now, right? Battery power. So remove that battery, control that energy, make sure it can't fire up. Also working on equipment, right? As simple as pulling the key out of the equipment, making sure we keep control of that piece of equipment while we're working on it. And then having a hazardous energy lockout tagout program. That's a requirement. That's a requirement for general industry. So warehousing, manufacturing, deliveries, that sort of stuff. Same thing in construction. So if we're out on construction sites, we still have to have our lockout tagout program. We got to make sure our electricians are following it. Our plumbers, et cetera, are all following it. Number 6 is kind of looped in with a few more here. Fall protection training. So fall protection has always been the top one for the past, I think 12 or 14 years now. That's the number 1 citation. Failure to have fall protection. We still think it's okay to work at height without fall protection. Now, fall protection means a lot of different things. It doesn't just mean being tied off. We're talking about guardrails. We're talking about stair rails. We're talking about working off of ladders so we don't need fall protection. There's different trigger heights, whether we're working off of scaffolding or off of steel. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Fall protection training got broken out. So if you have an OSHA standards book, or if you go to OSHA.gov, which I've got on a few of these screens that I'll bring up for you, but you can look up 1926.503. Okay. The way OSHA writes a standard is the first one, so 500 for fall protection instance, is basically your definitions, your basic rules to follow, and any exclusions. All right. So if I look in there, that's where I'm going to see that it's excluded in what we call subpart X and subpart R, which is steel erection. So it's going to tell me to go there and find my fall protection deal. But when it comes to training, 503, which is the end of that standard, tells me what I have to train my employees on. All right. Doesn't mean you have to go to college for it. Doesn't mean you have to go to me for 8 hours, 24 hours, or 40 hours talking about fall protection. It says a qualified person. So somebody, and we can go back to the definitions of what a qualified person is. A qualified person, somebody who's knowledgeable. They understand not only how this fall protection stuff works, but also what are the limitations of the fall protections. If I'm going to be working at 10 foot, I need to know that a 6 foot lanyard's not going to help me. Okay. I lock that in at 10 foot and I fall, I have a problem. I need 18 feet of clear free fall to make that work. So I think there's 13 or 14 sections in 503, but it goes through everything we're supposed to teach people in fall protection. If you're constantly working at height or your people are working at height, I highly suggest you put fall protection on your training calendar at least once a year. And that may be full classroom. It may be, for that month, we're going to use fall protection training month as March, and we're going to do all 4 of our toolbox talks are going to be fall protection. We might pull some video toolbox talks from JSI and people like that, to get to all of our people so that they can see what fall protection looks like. So that's number 6. Any questions in the second half of our top 10? No. Okay. Scaffolding. Again, scaffolding, there's over 26 different varieties of scaffold out there. There's hundreds of manufacturers. There's thousands of variations of scaffold. If you are going to use scaffold, your people have to be trained on the scaffold that you're using, whether it's a swing stage, whether it's fabricated frame, whether it's a baker scaffold, sawhorse scaffold, window washer scaffold, whatever it is, they have to be trained on that scaffold. Number 1, how is that scaffold supposed to be set up safely and correctly? Number 2, what are the limitations of that scaffold? So anytime we work at height, one limitation that a lot of people forget about is wind. How high does the wind get out there before we have to come down? We don't get up there and stay up there. Swing stages, is it 20 miles an hour? Is it 30 miles an hour? Even right up to our aerial lifts, right? Now they're MUPs, mobile elevated work platforms. We got to make sure, we know what that scissor lift or boom lift or whatever lift we're in, spider pod, whatever we're using, we got to make sure we know wind ratings. We got to make sure we know how much weight it can hold. Where are our tie-off points? Are there tie-off points? These nice big mobile scaffolds or these tower scaffolds, we need to know all that sort of stuff. So how much will it hold? Will it hold 4 times the intended load? And do we do our daily inspections? If you have scaffold out there, who's going to do your daily inspections before each work site? How do I prove that we've done those inspections? Just had a client that the only thing OSHA could think of on was they couldn't prove they had daily inspections. Their foreman said he inspected it. Their competent person said he inspected it, but they had no forms. OSHA doesn't say you have to use a tag. It doesn't say you have to use a form, but it's very difficult to prove that you do so without having something written. So again, a red tag, green tag system, a checklist. A lot of my companies that have to do checklist type stuff, they're using SurveyMonkey, creating a QR code, and then they can scan that QR code with their smartphone and it pops up their checklist that they've installed there. And that way, when it's done, it's automatically set up to file it. So it's just making technology make it much easier for us to use out there. They do that for forklift inspections. They do that for any piece of equipment, scaffold, fall protection, etc. So something to think about. Going up to HAZCOM, this has been top 5, I think, as long as I've been a safety person for 20 some years. So HAZCOM, we used to have the old MSDS binders. If you still have binders that say MSDS, you are way behind. We need to get those updated. All your people have to understand what global harmonization system looks like. That's the pictograms, that's the SDS sheets for each chemical. So if I get WD-40 out, it tells me, how can I use it correctly? Do I have to have any PPE? If it gets in my eyes, do I flush it with water? How much water? That's where OSHA gets us on eye wash stations and stuff like that, because everybody has their first aid kit and they have that little 2-ounce bottle. That little squish pack isn't going to supply you with 15 to 20 minutes of eye wash like a lot of chemicals require. So, we need to look at the chemicals we use and make sure we have our site set up accordingly. Also, the training. A lot of people get cited for a lack of training. So having that up and rolling is good. A lot of our clients have decided to go to a paperless system. They'll still keep the binders. Owners need binders because any chemical that's used on that project, the GC and the owner need to keep that chemical for use plus 30 years. So by going to a paperless system, what they can do is go, okay, we used, and they can go down the check boxes. We use this chemical, this chemical, this chemical, and they click on all those, and then it comes up with a site-specific binder for them. The nice thing about that is I've had OSHA out on the job site before. I knew the client used the paperless system. So I said, why don't you bring your tablet over here and let's show them your paperless system, because they were looking for something. I could tell it was something that the poor superintendent probably just picked up from Home Depot on his way out there. So we picked it up, searched for chemical. I put in the chemical name. It said, it's not in your database. Would you like to add it? I said, yes, please. It added it. I swung it around to OSHA. I said, there it is. It's right there. Like it had been there the whole time. And they said, okay, you guys have that system. We're walking away. So they didn't look for any more chemicals. So it's a great little system to have. They monitor it on a regular basis. I think it's monthly, each chemical. The year that I got into it, I didn't know WD-40 changed their compound like 3 times in 1 year. Nobody would, but we're required to keep up with all that. So they do that for you. So if you decide to go with a system like that, you can always reach out or Google a system like that. And they're pretty handy to have. Ladders. Nobody ever leans a ladder, right? Well, manufacturers got tired of people getting cited for leaning. So they started creating these lean safe ladders, cross step, lean safe. There's 4 or 5 different brands out there, but these are designed and able to be used in a leaning position. Some GCs have not bought onto this. They said, we still won't allow you to use lean safe ladders, but it's a double-edged sword, right? We've got much better ladders. They've got much better stability. They've got usually some type of device that's in there so it can either hold on to a stud, whether it be metal or wood stud, or at an angle, which is nice. The big problem is when we have a crew that has mixed ladders, they tend to forget some aren't lean safe ladders, and they tend to forget that when OSHA walks by. So we got to be careful with that. Ladders, the biggest things to remember, right? Extension ladders, we need to make them to where they're tall enough that if we're going to get off on a floor, we need to make sure that ladder goes 3 feet above that floor or that level or that roof, whatever it is. It needs to be 3 feet above. If there's more than an 18-inch break in elevation, we might need a ladder up and a ladder down. We might need a ladder up, step down onto a platform with a step, something like that, to where we're not going up to a parapet wall, for instance, on a building, getting off on that at 39 inches and then jumping off the other side. We can't do that. So we have to use ladders correctly. Not having a 20-foot ladder and a 5-foot trench. All right. So it's way out there to where if somebody climbs out, they can just wreck themselves by not paying attention. That's usually part of the problem there. Leaning only lean safe ladders, not step ladders that are not lean safe rated. Some of the new ladders have QR codes. Trying to think of Little Giant, I know, is one of the manufacturers. Not sure. I think Warner's starting to do this, but they have basically toolbox talks on those QR codes. It's how to use the ladder correctly. Use those. They put money into putting these video toolbox talks out there. Use the technology, right? If we're on uneven ground, which in construction, that's never, right? We're always on firm, flat, level ground, no rocks, no nothing. We have ladders with ladder leveler legs now. So the technology on ladders in the past 10 years is just shot straight up. There's tons of different ladders we can use out there. We need to use them correctly and per the manufacturer standard. At the end of the day, that's the main stuff. If they're riding out on trucks and they're the old extension ladders, just order a bunch of labels, contact the manufacturer, get a bunch of labels for that ladder, because the sun's going to bake those labels in about 6 months. So just slap a new one on and go. All right. Respiratory protection. So we watched this start to really go up when COVID happened for multiple reasons. Number one, we were all worried about COVID, so we used all of our N95 masks and that sort of deal. And if we have N95 masks, we have to have a written respirator program. We have to do training, right? If it's a dust mask, so up to an N95, we don't have a reason to use it, but we give it to everybody so they feel good. We at least need to still have a written program. And then we have to give them Appendix D of the respirator section, all of our employees, and have them sign off on it. They understand how to select a proper respirator per the hazard. Well, with COVID, everywhere there was a hazard. So it was no longer a voluntary use, it was a requirement, but nobody really paid attention to that issue. So when they did come out, when we could find them, not properly shaven, not fit tested, not medically evaluated, lack of training. So all these things started to get cited. And that's not only in construction, that happened in the medical field, that happened in warehousing. And for a while there, if you remember back to the first, say, 6 to 8 months, good luck finding them. So we were back to, 20 years ago with people with t-shirts around their face or something like that, trying to take care of silica or dust. Well, the particle's too small. That's really not going to do much. It hurts your lungs. So that's a major problem. Respiratory protection and silicosis. If you haven't done training on silica, please do it. It's a very small actionable number. So in an 8-hour time weighted average, we have to start taking action at 25 micrograms, which you go, that's great, but what does that mean? Basically, the thinnest hair, so brown, blonde, whatever, redheads have the thinnest hair. 25 micrograms will fit on the end of that hair. So it's very little bit of respirable silica. They call it crystalline silica, which is jagged, all right, which can go into your lungs and scrape up your lungs and cause long-term issues. It was a very big reason that we lost my dad back in September because he got COVID, but he had been in construction for 40 years. His lungs were all tore up. It was always hard when he got pneumonia or something like that. So, don't be that person. A lot of people go, oh, I don't need it, I'm too tough, I don't need, respiratory protection and all that. Think about your kids, think about other things down the road. Trust me, breathing's a beautiful thing. And being able to clear, pneumonia and COVID and other diseases that hit the respiratory tract is very important. I can tell you that firsthand. So again, respirator protection, there's a ton to know about it. I'm just scraping the surface. So we'll go up to number one. Number one's fall protection in construction, just overall, just the standard fall protection. You work above 6 feet, you need to be protected. How do you need to be protected? Can we put up guardrails so we protect everybody? Can we put up floor covers 2 times the intended load, secured in place, marked hole or cover? Can we put up nets, right? So you can fall into the nets, but if we fall into nets, we got to have testing, and we got to do it when we put it up in about every 6 months. There's a ton of different parts and pieces, and if not, can we tie off? And what do we tie off to? Rule of thumb is if we're over 6 feet and we're tying off, we want to restrict our movement so we can't fall much. Everybody likes that 6-foot shock absorbing lanyard, which is great, but it's kind of like that 10 millimeter socket that we use for just about everything. It's a great tool, but it only fits but so much, right? So if we're at 6 feet and we're below 18 feet free fall, that's not our tool. Maybe we need to go to a retractable. Maybe we need to go to a 2-foot without a shock pack. So we're going to fall restraint rather than fall protection. So fall protection requires a competent person. We always hear this word. What is a competent person? Everybody needs a competent person. So they'll call me, hey, can we hire you to be the competent person? No. Why not? because we don't work for your company. You have to have somebody that you designate that has the ability, that knows what they're doing. They have the background, they have the training, they have the education, and they understand the product and know the limitations of that product. Okay, that's the competent person. And they have to have the authority from you, the owner, or you, the manager, to be able to take immediate corrective action. They can't call the office to figure it out. So if OSHA comes out and they say, hey, who's the competent person? And you say, maybe me. Okay, great. You see those 3 people up there? If they fall off your roof right now, couldn't they get hurt? What are you going to do about it? I don't know. Let me call the office. That's not a competent person. All right. Competent person is going to take charge and go deal with that situation. So we need a competent person that carries out the program, make sure everything's going on, does the inspections and all that sort of stuff. We need a qualified person to write our safety program, to inspect our safety program. Qualified person. That's more what a consultant or somebody like me falls under, because we don't work directly for you. We can't order product. We can't, send people home. We can't get these, $3,000 rat line systems or $4,000 rat line systems without asking first. That's an in-house situation. So understanding some of that, and again, if you're over 6 feet, it's fall protection time. If you're 4 steps or more, you need to have a handrail. That's fall protection. Okay. They exclude it from subpart M. Again, in OSHA, we go A through Z, then we've got double A, double B, double C. We go to subpart M, that's going to be fall protection. And again, when we talk about stairways, that's X. All right. We go to stairways and it says 4 steps or more, we got to have a handrail, and it has to be both ways if we have, 2 lanes of travel. So if we have more than 2 people out there, we have to have handrails on both sides of our stairs. That's simple. At our landings, if our landing's over 6 feet, we got to have guardrails. All right. So, we need to know that 42-21 hold 200 pounds. If we're using 2x4s, we need to know the uprights can't go beyond 8 foot. If we're using wire rope for guardrails, we need to know that it needs to be flagged. We need to know that we can't push down and get more than 2 inches of slack out of it at any place. So we got to make sure we set up our fall protection systems accordingly. So that's the OSHA top 10. And that's just about pretty much on time, because that was the first half. And that's really what I wanted to go through on the first half. Do we have any questions about these 10 items? Chat box, key up your mic, whatever you want to do. Okay. Well, I'm going to switch to local emphasis programs. Let me get out of this. Did it switch, or do I need to reshare my screen?
It switched.
It switched. Yeah. Okay, perfect. So this, again, we're looking, let me get rid of this. Yes, that's what I want to share. Okay, so again, this is our region, region 3. If you're in New Jersey and New York, you're region 2, and so forth and so forth. But this is the regional emphasis programs. This is what's seeing a lot of accidents around here, and it gives us when these came in. And a lot of them were 2019. We had one 2022. That's our warehousing operations. So if you have a warehousing operation, there's a percentage of inspections that are going to go to you. And then they have a PDF for each one of these. So if you fall into metal fabrication, for instance, come in here to OSHA.gov, look up local emphasis program in the search bar, and it'll bring you to the regional local emphasis programs. Click on region 3, hit that PDF, and it's going to tell you what they're looking for. Okay. So metal fab shops, they're coming in, they're going to look for dust hazards. They're going to look for chemical hazards. They're going to look for proper ventilation, welding, noise, etc. There's a lot of stuff there. Warehousing. We're seeing a lot of people where the racks aren't bolted to the ground. Go back into your shops. If you have shops, are your storage racks bolted to the ground or secured to the wall? We need to know that, because that most of those only get their weight rating if they're secured properly. So we're seeing a lot of warehousing where if they hit one rack, you watch it go over to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, knock all the racks over. Can hurt and kill people, has hurt and killed people. A lot of blind corners for forklifts. There's no mirrors or whatever in the workplace so you can't see around. They're not using spotters. I mean, think about if you go to Home Depot or Lowe's and they're getting something off the top shelf, what do? They come back to the end of both sides of the aisle, shut that aisle down, pull that down. And once that lift is, fairly secure, then they'll open the aisles back up, but not until then. So that's some stuff for warehousing they've got to watch out for. Demolition activities. So if you're doing a gut rehab, there's a lot of focus that's going to be on you around here. We open up walls, we open up floors. We have a lot of people that fall through those openings. So they want to see that dust. Dust is huge. Silica is huge in those issues. Fall hazards in construction. This is renewed in 2019, but has been a local emphasis program and a national emphasis program for at least 10 or 15 years. High noise level. So in general industry, again, shops, warehouses, trucking yards, all that sort of stuff, that's general industry. So we have to do pre-hire screenings for noise. Construction, we don't. Well, most of the times we get claims, what happens? Finally, OSHA hits us because we have loud things happening and we don't have the proper hearing protection. And then we start doing hearing surveys and we find out, hey, that person you just hired that's a 40-year vet who says, every time you say something, can't hear very well. Well, guess what? Where do you think that claim's going? It's now going to you. So some pre-hire screening and stuff like that, definitely worth looking at. Fitness for duty. I know a lot of people are more worried about getting bodies right now than, going through all the fitness for duty stuff. And that's biting a few of my clients. I know that. So we still have to be a little selective on who we hire when we can be. Logging in West Virginia, that's very regional emphasis program. There was a lot of deaths in logging in West Virginia, so they're going after that. Maritime inspections, oil and gas service industry, and tree trimming and clearing operations. So if you're, you might be a landscaper and you go, well, we don't do tree trimming operations, but there's chainsaws in your fleet and there's, these different climbing gears and stuff like that. So, your people can go up and trim a couple limbs off. It's not that big of a deal. Anything over 2 inches, you're logging. So that's the logging first aid CPR kit. That's the logging training. That's the whole 9 yards. So again, if you do that sort of stuff, you've got to watch out for that. So again, this is just on the OSHA website, which I'm going to switch these screens over here for a second and show you the OSHA website as well. So if you go to OSHA.gov, this is what pops up. Our second session, we're going to talk about our OSHA 300 forms. We're also going to talk about the requirement for setting up your account to if you've got more than 20 employees and you're in high hazard, which is most of construction industry, you have to actually put in your OSHA 300 logs, et cetera, to OSHA now.
Excuse me, Matt. We can't see your screen anymore. It's still on the last screen.
Oh, why is that? How about now?
Yep.
Oh, there we go. So when you first sign on, this is what it goes to. And this is basically how to set up that account to go ahead and do that. But if we scroll down a little bit, sometimes if I'm doing a safety class or a safety committee, I'll put up this scrolling so people can see these people who lost their lives and what they were doing. I mean, Acosta 31 tank explosion, Solarov suffocated in a fire, okay, electrocuted by a plasma cutter, 46 kneading machine. They don't give all the gory details, but these are all the people who have died in the past, usually 3 to 6 months. So it kind of brings it into form a little bit to remember why we're doing the safety stuff. Scrolling down, if there was ever a complaint you needed to file, etc., that's all right here. Submit injury and illness data, that takes you back. We'll talk about that in the next session if you're around. And then it gives you some different items, working in the winter, etc. What I want to take everybody to is 2 sections. Number 1, actually, they changed this again. Take a quick glance. So data and statistics under help and resources, they have something called establishment search. So if I'm a GC, all right, I'm going to put in just ABC because it's easy. Anything with ABC is going to pop up here, but I'm looking at some subs and maybe I got a couple that are close. I'm just going to pop up good old OSHA.gov and I'm going to put their name in and I'm going to look for the area that we're in at least and see if they have any OSHA citations. So when a client calls me or prospect client calls me, oh, we'd love to, we'd love to chat with you. We want to get better, blah, blah, blah. Really, have you seen OSHA at all? Oh, no. Then at the first meeting, I pull out their OSHA record and go, well, we saw you here with a citation. We got another citation here. We got another citation here. Did you know about these, or is that the stuff you need help with? And then it's, oh, well, yeah. So if we pull one up, I'm just going to pull random something in Illinois. This 19 right here, ABC Roofing. They're a big national company. Here's one where you can see what they got cited for. Here's 4 different citations. They got repeats. This was last year, but the repeats, they did not do the $140,000 like they should have done. They gave them a penalty that was a little more their size. And the way they do that is whenever you get cited, again, it's $14,500 right now for a serious, it comes down. How big are you? Have you seen OSHA? Did you take immediate corrective action? Were you easy to work with? Under federal OSHA, they have one. Do you have a safety consultant? That automatically gets you 3% off, which I don't know what safety consultant stepped up and got that, but God bless them for me. But there's a lot of stuff that goes into what your actual penalty becomes. And then once you get the citation, you have 15 days to fight that citation, which we did in the last one of these presentations. So I'm sure that's up on Preferred's website. We'd love to get that link and we can share that on our website as well, Preferred. So this is just something that you can do. And the other one that I'd like to show you real quick while we have a little time before our question and answer here is, let me back out of this, Safety Pays. And again, if we have time, we may go to this again in the next session. OSHA Safety Pays program, they've updated a little bit. They need to update it again, but it's basically, what is the possibility? How much is it going to cost, right? So we're going to take a look. We're going to put in our profit margin, et cetera. And then we put in a cut, a contusion, something with stitches, et cetera. Let's just do real quick injury type. We had a burn. We're going to add that. We look at our OSHA 300 form. We look at what the accidents were. We had a crush. We're going to add that. And randomly, we had a fracture. Add that. So what it's telling us is the direct cost, right? This is what the insurance company covers. These claims for a burn are going to average about $47,000. A crushing activity is going to be about $67,000. A fracture is going to be about $54,000. So that's your initial hospital. That's your different things, your people's cost that's actually hard numbers. Then we have something called indirect costs. All right. If you take a look at this second session, let me get my little tool here. Where's my arrow? There we go. So I got direct costs and we've got these. Can everybody see that? And then we have indirect costs. So this is replacing that tool, having a new employee, breaking a new employee in, all of the chitter chatter time between your employees talking about it, not doing anything, your loss in production. This is the cost that the company pays. The insurance company doesn't pay this because there's no hard number. There's no receipt we can put with this. But there is a calculation that we use to figure this stuff out. And then what's our total additional sales to get rid of this? So if we have a 3% profit margin, right, just to get rid of our indirect costs, we have to do a job that's 1.7 million basically for free to get rid of that accident. So at the end of the day, yeah, insurance paid for the direct costs, but all those indirect costs, et cetera, are going to cost you in the long run. And, where's it hit you? It hits you in profitability. Not only that, it also hits you in your EMR, which some of you know about, but we'll talk more about in the next session. So it's a couple cool tools. If I'm trying to get a client to look at doing a cut program, They have a lot of cuts. I had one that had, it was like over a dozen cuts, and they were all small issues. I'm going to stop sharing now. There we go. They had several that were just small claims, but frequency is a big issue when it comes to EMR. But they didn't want to spend, I think it was like $2,500 on cut level gloves for their employees for the first 6 months to see how it went. And I pulled up that cost calculator and I showed them, and then they looked at some of their claims and they're like, it's pretty close. It's really close. And then we looked at, what their additional sales were. And I said, or we can, spend that budget, get some gloves and get people in there. And they were much, much happier to get on board there. With that, we have 15 minutes left. So I wanted to leave this as open time. So again, you can ask questions, you can kick on your mics, be happy to talk to anybody, answer questions, whatever. So if you have any issues, if you have any questions, now's your time. I'm also checking the chat box. Nobody. Quiet as a mouse.
You just cover everything so thoroughly, nobody has questions.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to ask you, do you have any fall protection courses that you're offering anytime soon?
We usually do fall protection for the client themselves. So, and we do them on all different levels. So we can have what we call our awareness class, which is 2 hours. That's kind of you stay away from it unless you know more class. And then fall protection, we do 4 hours for user, which is our basic level. 8 hour is our basic, kind of covered all for a supervisor. We try not to call it competent person, but it meets the criteria. And then we have the military EM 385 24 hour, and we also have a 40 hour that we go through. So if you have any of those that you
EM
need,
385 20 hour.
what's that?
You said an EM 385 20 hour.
24 hour. Yeah, it's 3 days.
24 hour. Okay.
And we're seeing it's been a standard that most bases have used that they need, but they haven't been enforced until I would say the last year. We've seen a lot of contracts. All of a sudden they get a new safety officer that's just been trained and understand that. They come in and it's, where's your 24-hour card? Nobody has it. And we're doing a lot of those catch-up classes right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem.